Couple quick announcements. We have an exam on Tuesday in this classroom at this time on Tuesday. Okay, bring a pencil. We'll provide a Scantron and an exam. Review sessions have been circulated. I believe there's one tomorrow and one on Monday. If you don't know the details on that yet, please check your email because I think I sent that around yesterday. And Emily and I have both expanded our office hours. I have an extra office hour today. Happy to chat with anybody at that time. Also, I want to try something new. In addition to people who want to come by my office hours, I will also be as available as humanly possible by email. So if that proves to be a more efficient way for you to send questions my way, then please feel free to do that. So I will look forward to getting your questions, and I will respond to them as promptly as possible. Any questions for me as we're thinking about the next week ahead of us? Questions about the exam? Okay. All right. Okay, as questions come up, please feel free to send them my way. Did I miss anybody? Okay, great. So today we move in a very important new direction in the class. Up until this point, not sure if this is going to work. Up until this point, we've talked a lot in the last two lectures about who the individuals are even before they arrive in their relationships, right? Who are they developmentally? What are their personality traits like? What are their attachment styles? We learned a lot about that in our last class. What were their families like, and how can we make sense of those experiences in the family of origin in a way that helps us to understand how relationships are going to unfold through, into and through adulthood. Today we're going to talk more about those individuals when they actually start interacting with one another, and what the nature of those conversations are, and what happens in those conversations in such a way that it allows the relationship to grow stronger, to grow closer, or to head in the opposite direction. And we've already talked in the lecture on attraction and mate selection about the importance of disclosures and how people talk to one another. And I want to elaborate on that idea some today. And in fact, this is the first of really what will amount to 3 lectures on interactional processes specifically in relationships. So today I'll be talking about maintaining intimacy, how people communicate closeness and maintain intimacy. After the midterm, you'll hear 2 lectures. They'll actually be guest lectures on conflict and aggression. So that will be Chapter 8 material. So we'll really dive in deeply into what are the sort of the interactional patterns that enable us to have good relationships, or that allow us that sort of foreshadow the downfall of our relationships. And so let's jump in on the first part. There's a simple way of thinking about where we're going. And again, all the conflict stuff is post-midterm. So you can worry about that later. But the idea is that within our relationships, there are forces that join us to our partner. We might think of those as pro-social forces. And there are forces that pull us away from our partner once we're in an established relationship. Today we're more on the joining side. What is it that we do that enables us to join and connect and communicate closeness? Now this becomes an important consideration because there is a difference between, and I'm sorry to have to be the one to tell you this, there is a difference between how the first 6 months of your relationship go and how the next 6 years go. There is a difference. The first 6 months are going to feel fantastic and wonderful, and Mother Nature wants you to feel that way, and by the way, hopes you will have babies a lot during that period of time. After that, you're then sort of just staring at each other and trying to make the best of it. That's sort of how relationships work. And this lecture is about, once you sort of move past that really great thrilling stage, how do you keep it thrilling? You have to invest energy, right? It doesn't happen naturally in the way it does in the first 6 months. It can be just as good, but it's a little more effortful. And my question for you today is, where do we best direct those efforts? What are the best things for us to do? And really, in a sense, what I'll be talking about is what have relationship scientists had to say about the kinds of interactions that can occur within our more established relationships that really allow them to stay strong and healthy. And this matters because things like this happen. Here's a priest or something saying, "Do you, Thomas, promise to pay attention for the first year and then phone it in for the rest of your life?" Right? The idea that in the first year it's going to be great and you want to be there, and after that, not so much. And here's the opposite side, which is the woman, and the priest is saying, "Do you, Rebecca, promise to make love only to Richard month after month, year after year, and decade after decade until one of you is dead?" Here's the 7,506 night stand for this couple. The idea being that relationships really do change. Relationships change, and if you don't recognize that your relationship is changing, you say, why don't I feel the way today that I felt the very first time I met you? Why don't we have all of that good stuff working in our favor? The answer is because we're built to really join, and I think there's even some real sense of a chemical attraction, and that cannot be sustained. If the level of positivity that we were experiencing that early in our relationship sustained itself, and that level of sexual interest in our relationship sustained ourselves, we would probably die eventually, too quickly, if we were that into our partner. So we have to be more strategic. We have to invest new energy. We have to have new inputs. Somehow the system has to be guided and managed, whereas prior to this stage, I think it's fair to say that we were being guided more by this biological system. At least that's my perspective. To the point where when you get to be this old, the guy walks in the door and he sees his wife with another man, and his only reaction is, "My wife, my best friend, hey, that's my chair. Come on, that's not right." Where at some point it actually has very little to do with the partner itself. Now, none of us are going to get to that point in our relationships because we're going to figure it out. But on average, it's important to recognize that relationships become less satisfying over time. This is referred to as the honeymoon and then years of blandness phenomenon. Sorry to say. Here's a longitudinal study by my late colleague Larry Kurdick. Not that you need to know that, but these are the averages, right? So this is a study of 93 couples studied over a decade. They start off high. Those numbers in the parentheses are standard deviations. Don't worry about those. But over time, on average, things go down. This number down here, this is marital quality on the y-axis. That level of relationship functioning is still not that bad. It's still in the satisfied range of functioning. But that average is such, that standard deviation of 18 or 17, 10 years later, means that a substantial number of people are not so happy in their relationship. So if a couple comes to you for therapy, or if you are a teacher in a classroom and you're seeing parents, you want to recognize that chances are they're somewhere on this trajectory, right? On average, that their relationship has lost some of that glow that comes naturally when we're much younger, or at least much earlier in our relationship. Now, this is an average, right? Oh, and other aspects of the relationship change as well. People negotiate closeness. People are trying to figure out how to sustain the relationship now, how to work on the relationship, how close we're going to be, what roles we're going to be, etc. This is a study by a guy named Ted Houston at the University of Texas, and he started with newlyweds. There they are 2 months into their marriage, and also assessed them 12 months later and then 12 months later after that. He also knew at something like 13 years where these relationships ended up. that part isn't so important. But the idea is that if you were in this study and he would call you at those time points and he would say, over the last 24 hours, tell me which of these things have happened in your relationship. And they would be things like, I gave my partner a hug, I kissed my partner, we said sweet things to each other, we had sex, we snuggled, we had a really deep heart-to-heart conversation. Well, these are the number of those sorts of things that would have happened at each of these stages in your relationship. And you can see they go from somewhere north of 20 of those things in a day to somewhere south of 10 2 years into your relationship. So this is a real phenomenon. It's an average, but it is a real phenomenon. So here's the yes question.
If they kept following them, or if there have been studies following them more, because that was when the children were probably like in early elementary school. Right.
Right, so the question is, what if you followed people even longer, right? What if you followed people for an even longer period of time? Maybe there were unique challenges in couples' relationships. Possibility of kids being very young, for example, was raised. And so, it's worth noting, one of the things you learn when you do psychological research is you get interested in a study, but you don't assume that it's definitive. So let's point out something interesting here that may not be definitive. Things started to level out there for a while, right? On average, you see, like between year 4 and year 8, things got kind of stable, but maybe new things happened. Maybe that was the arrival of a second child, for example. And so the system was sort of had reorganized itself after the first child, or after people restabilized themselves in their jobs, but then something else happened to make it more difficult. Yeah. Oh, okay, let me go through that. It's not a critical part of the slide, but it's worth knowing about. So anyway, the idea is life events can change the average and change the rate at which your relationship changes. But the point of the question on this slide was, what is this stuff on the right side? The stuff on the right side is, again, it's not critical to understanding the point. What's the point? The point is our relationships generally become less affectionate with the passing of time, even though that's the last thing that you want, right? We don't want that to happen, and yet it happens. That's what's really intriguing about this. The different lines refer to where these couples end up being, say, 10 or 12 years later. Okay, so that's their outcomes. And what's interesting is that even for the couples, the red line, say, the couples who way out here are still happy in their relationship, even they are declining in their level of affection in this shorter window, the first 2 years of the marriage, right? So the point is, I don't want to say this too strongly, but almost regardless of where you end up several years later, this is a likely phenomenon. So the emotional tenor, the emotional experiences that we have in our relationship early on really change pretty dramatically. You'd think that, you settle in with somebody, you marry somebody, you find somebody you really love, you're off the dating market, things are great, you went to IKEA and bought all that furniture, and wait a minute, I thought this was I thought we were going to be in love and snuggling forever. Guess what? It doesn't happen that way. That's the average, though, right? So remember this graph that I showed in our first personality lecture? The idea is that's the average. So within that one average that looks really scary, right? You say, I'm going to start off as a happy newlywed, and then 10 years later I'm going to be sort of miserable. If that's the average, we have to recognize that there's a group that stays steady up on top. Those are those top 3 groups. And then there's those 2 bottom groups. The number of groups doesn't matter. It's the idea that matters. That there are other groups that really have a marked risky profile. They're really dropping pretty dramatically, right? So we have to say, well, what sorts out these people? Because some people, what this means is that affection tends to decline over time for most people. But some people still say, this is still a pretty great relationship. Even if that's changing, I get it. I'm adjusting, I'm adapting to the changes that are happening in our relationship. Other people really go south. Other people really struggle and pay a price, yeah. What's what? Oh, this is just relationship satisfaction. So that's just how happy people are on the y-axis there over time. And the point is that even though there is an average that I showed you that goes downhill, within that average are embedded really different kinds of people. Some people are really happy forever. Some people really struggle right out of the gate. Okay? So we have to wonder, well, what's going on in these relationships, the ones that are struggling, and what makes it different from the couples who are thriving? And the details of these slides are not crucial. I showed you a parallel version when I was talking about personality traits, which, by the way, is on the exam. And the point here is, even with a little slice of behavior, a 10 or 20-minute conversation of me watching you interact with your partner, we can already see that you're starting off with a lot of capacity for positivity or a lot of capacity for negativity, and that matters. So remember that the group on the very far left, remember that from a week ago? Those are the unhappiest of couples. You can see if you look at groups 1 and 2, these are people who are really high in observable negative emotion and low in positive emotion. And then as you go up the chart, right, as you go up to the higher and higher, the more satisfied relationships, you get way less physical aggression, for example, than average, and you get more positivity than average, right? So the point is that these are behavioral processes. There are interactional processes that are unfolding in couples' relationships as time passes, and that the way that we think about counteracting this tendency for our relationships to feel a little deflated or to lose some of their gloss, the way we counteract that, the way any of us can counteract that, is to think about ways to engage our partner in positive ways, pro-social interactional joining processes, solve that problem for us. This is the same idea for men. And again, you see way low levels of positivity, high levels of negativity and aggression, higher levels of negativity and aggression, and then it tends to flip as you move toward more satisfying relationships. So the idea here, the critical idea, is that when we're thinking about maintaining a relationship, we're really thinking about engaging in pro-social kinds of activities, and I want to outline several of them today, that enable you to stay healthy and strong. I want to give you a little perspective on how psychologists and relationship scientists have thought about this problem. This is the staircase model, which should look familiar to you, and there is one question on this on the exam. Bless you. And you've seen the left side of this chart when we talked about attraction and mate selection. So remember, we talked about when relationships come together, we go through things like an initiating stage, an experimenting stage. We sort of get, we disclose a lot more to our prospective partner, and we get connected to them. And then usually, not always, but usually we then say, let's be monogamous, let's be together and not have other relationships. And then when you get to that bonding stage, one of the key features is that other people come to see you as a stable, committed partnership, your family, your friends, people around you. What I'm adding to that idea, what I'm adding to that part of the staircase, is that sometimes you go down the staircase, right? It's not just a matter of getting more and more tightly connected as time passes through those steps as you sort of get to a higher and higher step. You also, in many relationships, start to decline, right? There's believed to be, and I would put that in quotes, believed to be a reasonable series of stages. And if you think about relationships that you've been in that have sort of dwindled and fallen apart, you say, oh yeah, we start to spend a little less time together. I'm doing things without you that I used to do with you. I really feel like our relationship isn't growing. We're not really putting forth any effort. That'd be like a stagnation stage. Then at that point, it gets to be so painful that I don't even want to look at your texts, and I take you out of my directory on my phone. And then, by the way, your friend's girlfriend tells you that you're no longer in a relationship, right? So that's how that all works, usually. But the point is that as we go up, sometimes we also come out on the other end and struggle and go downhill. But in that middle stage, and probably as you think about the committed long-term relationships that you've been in, you spend a lot of time neither in sort of going up the staircase, because you've already done that, but really saying, we don't want to go down the other end of the staircase, so what do we do in this middle stage? And the idea is we're sort of always evolving in that middle oval. We're sort of reconnecting, we're rebonding, we're engaging in social interactions with people, our families, for example. You go to a wedding, now you guys are the partners who go to somebody else's wedding, and you become part of a smaller community. But you're still sort of figuring out who you are. You're creating different identities, differentiating yourselves within the relationship. And so that key bubble, that term, relational maintenance, is an important term. All right, that's a term that is exactly what you think it is. And it's an important idea because it's probably where we spend most of our time in most of our long-term committed partnerships, right? That's what we're doing, is we're sort of making sure that things stay strong. We're trying to make sure that we're not on a downward trajectory in our relationship. We're sort of paying attention to the things that matter, fixing difficulties, repairing problems, and ideally, helping people to grow, helping our partners to grow, and helping them to figure out how we want to grow, right? So this is a really important stage. We spend a lot of our time in our relationships not just creating a new relationship or ending a relationship that's not working out, but really just being in the relationship. And that's when we think of relational maintenance as sort of being a crucial part of what we do to stay strong and healthy. So, just like your dashboard in your car has a service engine soon light, it turns out that, maybe you don't know this, your relationship has the exact same light. You just don't notice it. But it's really there, and it really matters, and you really should be paying attention to it. And here is the definition of relationship maintenance that I want you to sort of appreciate. It's the idea that these are the routine behaviors, stuff you do generally, and the strategies that partners enact to help ensure that a valued relationship is going to continue. And that can involve taking steps to strengthen a relationship that's already good. Like, how do we make this better? How do we engage in new activities, take trips, hang out with new people, discover new things, have children to make our relationship better or deeper or richer, or whatever that might be? What do we do to strengthen a good relationship, try to avoid deterioration in relationship, and repair problems that are coming up? Okay? So this is relationship maintenance. It's a big part of where we spend our time. Now, this is an important idea that I alluded to in the attraction and mate selection chapter. And it's something called the intimacy process model. Okay, so you get this idea that relationships change over time, that some of that is normative, but we also want to take an active approach to making sure we maintain our relationship, we do things to keep it strong. Underlying that idea is a dyadic process, right? I want to get sort of deeper into what those conversations are like. And this is a model that we use to think about that. I don't want to go through all of it, but a key idea is that there's two people in this case, and we'll call them person A and person B. And A says something, I don't think things are working out quite the way I had hoped. This relationship is losing something, don't you think? And B says, well, honey, I've never felt closer to you than in all my life. And instead of B, see, that's an interpretive filter. So imagine your partner says to you later today, I'm not so sure about this. This isn't quite what I had hoped to. Your partner of 2 years, let's say. wow, I can get defensive, I can get scared, I can get upset, but chances are I'm going to have a take, I'm going to have a reaction, I'm going to have a response, and that's you, that's B, okay? And you say, well, I'm interested to hear more about what you say, right? And so then A says, oh, you really do still care. How nice, I'm so delighted. And then A says something back to B, okay? So this is sort of a working definition of how two people communicate and regulate closeness and intimacy in their relationships, right? One person says something, the other person hears it and responds. The other person hears that and responds, right? So what's interesting about this is that A's reaction to B's response is kind of crucial, which is if A says, if B says, like I just said, the middle part, tell me more about what you mean. This relationship matters a lot to me. I want to hear what you have to say. Then A's reaction to B might be, well, that feels good, right? That's a mature response. I'm really glad to have heard that. But if B instead says, well, why is it always about you? Why do you have to be so selfish all the time? Why are you so needy? Like, that's a conversation we need to have right now. So A just said, let's talk about our, this is the DTR conversation, right? So A says, I want to improve our relationship. I'm not so sure this is going so well. And if B instead says, you are the needy one, that's my filter. When I hear you say that, I say, wow, it's always about you. Why are you never happy? And B says, why are you never happy, right? And now, in contrast to the earlier example I gave, now A is saying, wow, I'm the needy one here, right? And now the way that we think about how two people join up in a relationship and stay strong in a relationship is whether in a sort of a moment-by-moment basis we say, wow, that felt good. When I said to Joe I wasn't so happy with the way things are going in the relationship, and Joe said, well, tell me more about it, because this relationship matters to me, and if there's something we can do, I think we've invested a lot, and I think I care deeply for you. Well, then A says, wow, that's nice, right? I'm really glad that I'm with a person who cares about what I have to say. Maybe I'm more inclined to be invested in this relationship. Maybe I'm going to spend a little time and find out what's going on and how we really can make this a stronger relationship, right? So if in the course of our conversations I feel understood and validated and cared for, then I go back and I feel better about my relationship, right? So then A, see these loops come back over, A says, wow, that's really great that you're willing to consider that. Like, that feels right. So what you've got is what you can see behaviorally, A's disclosure or expression of something about what they're experiencing, B responding to that through some filter, right? A hearing that response through some filter, and this is the key part, to the extent that A feels, having just made this disclosure, to the extent that A feels understood, validated, and cared for, then that relationship is going to stay strong more than it's going to go in a bad direction, right? Being understood, being valued, being cared for, being affirmed are critical dimensions of how you and your partner are making decisions about the relationship. It's very rare for someone to say, my relationship with Betty, fantastic. She gets me, she understands me, she takes care of me when I say things, she responds, she's not too cloying, she gives me my space when I need it. But you know what, I don't want to hang around with her anymore. We don't say that. We say, that's a good relationship, I want to be with her. And you might say, we might try to find out ways to make it better, but these three criteria on the right side, understanding, validation, caring, these are what happen in good relationships. I want to show you a clip of the late, great Robin Williams, passed away last year, as you know, from a movie called Mrs. Doubtfire. And I want to show you a clip of him. As you know, he gets kicked out of his house, and then he responds to an ad by his ex-wife, the lovely Sally Field, and he dresses up like Mrs. Doubtfire. He becomes Mrs. Doubtfire so he can hang around his kids and also talk to his wife, right? So that's the premise of this movie. There is a really poignant scene when he comes back into the home and he talks with his ex-wife about what happened in their marriage, okay? And that's the scene I want to show you. And what it will reveal, I hope, is this idea that they did not engage in the intimacy process model, right? So let me show you this. See the idea. Relationships changing, so that was clearly a conversation about how the relationship had changed, how life took over. You settle into a relationship and other responsibilities take hold. Perhaps children arrive, you need an income, various demands and stresses and strains register. And for her, that was hard, right? She said how she would spend so much time at work, she wouldn't get to see the kids, she didn't like the way she was becoming. But they also couldn't have the conversation that would allow them to get on the other side of that. Even though she saw really great characteristics in her husband, Daniel, Mrs. Doubtfire, even though she saw those really great characteristics, over time she wasn't so thrilled by his not holding down a job. But they also couldn't have the serious conversations. They couldn't have the conversations that led her to feel like what I'm doing is good. The way I am is legitimate and valid, and I have a partner in this process, right? And I think the most poignant moment in that exchange is when he says, "So did you guys talk about that?" He says, "No, we never really did. Like that just wasn't part of the conversation." But that's really all we have in our relationships, right? Is that ability to say, look, I'm here for you, I'm available, even though all this other stuff is happening to us, that I can make you feel understood, I can make you feel good about yourself, I can make you feel good about the future of this relationship. So that's the intimacy process model, that there are disclosures, the disclosures are not really properly responded to, and as a result, people grow apart. People grow frustrated. People feel like their needs aren't being met. When somebody says, my needs aren't being met, partly that might be sexual, but partly it might also mean my partner doesn't get me. Like my partner is too selfish. My partner is not focused on me enough. And if two people do that, if two people sort of go down the path without really acknowledging and attending to one another's needs, then they grow apart. Then they feel less and less satisfied, and the challenges that everybody faces in life become too overwhelming, and they decide it's easier to take those on their own. So we have to talk about what do people do to keep their relationship healthy and strong. I'm not sure how much of this I'll be able to get through. But the book outlines 5 different domains in which we engage interactionally in pro-social processes, joining processes, ways of maintaining our relationship, right? This is how we maintain our relationship. Usually in the course of our daily lives, obviously, this is, we don't make big differentiations amongst these things. But what I want to do is talk a little bit, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I do want to start talking about shared activities. And there is a big cake here because this is the appetitive part of our relationship. This is the part that we're drawn to. This is the part that when we do these things, it does feel good. It really does connect us. And in surprising ways, we get real bang for the buck. We really get an experience with our partner when we engage in these processes that strengthens the bond, that allows our partner to say, here's how I'm feeling. Let me respond to that in a way that helps you to feel understood and validated and cared for. And what that does is it just creates that interdependence. The defining characteristic of our relationship that we talked about in week 1, that interdependence that we're sharing becomes more salient, becomes more obvious. And when we reflect on how our relationship is going, good things come to mind rather than bad things. So what do? Well, one thing we do is we go bungee jumping with our partners there on the right side. The idea is that when we engage in challenging, arousing activities with our partner, when we, after the early stage of our relationships, one of the things we can really benefit from is getting up, getting on our feet, and really being actively engaged with our partner in new shared activities. And this is work by Art Aaron, a social psychologist who used to be at Stony Brook University. And he developed this idea of self-expansion theory, where he said that relationships become less fulfilling on average, and I sort of documented that at the beginning of lecture today, because opportunities for expanding the self in our relationships diminish. So when we connect up with somebody early on in a relationship, we take on all of their properties, all of their characteristics, all of the people we know, and we get a greater sense of who we are, as do they. And that brings with it a lot of really great positive emotion. So the idea, according to Art Aaron, is that we're expanding ourselves at that time. Then, and that was certainly the case in the Mrs. Doubtfire clip, right? There was a time when, wow, there was a lot of positive emotion and it really felt great. But then time passes, right? And we have to actively take steps to create that emotion, right? And the kinds of steps, the kinds of activities that allow us to have those feelings are challenging things. It's not sitting on a couch watching DVDs, it turns out. It's not just doing nothing. It's getting on your feet, challenging yourself. And I think what really, and so the efforts have to be active, and they counteract this natural tendency for our relationships to lose some of their gloss. And even experimental data show that when we engage in novel and arousing activities with our partner, that can increase our judgments of how happy we are in our relationship. Doesn't need to be expensive, but you need to do something. And I think one of the mechanisms that goes into this process is seeing your partner in a new way, is really being able to see your partner through in a new circumstance, in a new setting, and having them see you, take a little bit of a risk. Guess what? If you're the most awkward person bowling in the world, that's going to be a great thing for your partner to see. And the opposite is also going to be true, because then you'll say, I took a risk, I looked goofy as hell, I kept throwing it down the gutter, and my partner still loves me. That's a pretty great thing, right? So you learn, when you and your partner enter new situations, you learn new things about your partner, and you also learn that you're still a good person regardless of what you do with them. So that is where the power of shared activities come from. They have to be arousing, they have to be novel, they have to be challenging, they have to get us moving. There probably has to be some possibility of screwing up in a significant way, so that you're really not just doing, you're not just engaging in the status quo, you're doing something fun and exciting. So that's the power of shared activities, and it counteracts this tendency for ourselves to expand. It creates opportunities for expansion. Another idea, and I want to contrast this with the idea of social support, which I'll talk about in a minute, is the idea of capitalization. And capitalization refers to this idea that when good things happen, you don't just leave them there. You expand on them. You talk about them. You find out more about them. And again, this is in that oval of relational maintenance, that in the course of your daily lives, what you want to do is not rush past the good stuff that happened in your day. Right? Part of what you do when you get into your relationship is you just live your lives together, right? You're just spending time together, and you know a lot about your partner, but you don't know everything that happened today about your partner. And that's where people focus, right? That's what people talk about at the end of the day. They talk about, how was your day? Tell me something that happened to you today. I want to know. And if it's something really good, the capitalization idea is don't ignore that. Pay attention to that. Talk about that. Acknowledge how great it was that your partner was able to achieve that or experience that or be there for that, right? And find out more. That's a little opening to say, really? Tell me more about that. I want to hear more about that, right? So now your partner says, this experience happened to me, and this is the intimacy process model. I perceive that, and instead of saying, gee, why don't good things happen to me? Why are good things always happening to you? Or why aren't you going to listen to what I have to say, right? That's my filter. Instead, if I say, I have a partner who does those great things, and then I say, tell me more about that, well, my partner then says, wow, I feel understood. I feel validated, because every time I talk about something positive, my partner wants to hear more about how great I am. Gee, that's a good thing. Most of us really like that, right? So the idea in capitalization is that sharing positive events allows us to relive those events, see that other people are pleased for us, and also deepens the good memories that we have. And I like to think of capitalization as weaving the fabric of our relationships more tightly. And so, whereas conflict and a disagreement or a dispute over how stressed you are, no, I'm more stressed than you, my life's harder than yours, pay attention to me, whereas those conversations are especially likely to lead us feel like, gee, I'm not getting heard here, I'm not feeling connected, I don't feel like my partner's paying attention to me. These conversations say, let's dwell on the positive, right? And certain responses are better than others. So according to Shelley Gable, who is now at Santa Barbara in psychology, when we are active and constructive in our responding, when we're really pursuing these things, not just hearing them, but asking questions about them, and really attaching the success to who our partner is and the kind of life they live, then that's a positive moment. Even from a social learning point of view, which you know about from our theory chapter, that's a way of saying, oh, this is a rewarding place for me to be. This feels good when I share these events with my partner. So if in your own lives, you're in a relationship, you want to look for these opportunities and not skate past them. Use these as a way of talking to your partner and finding out more about how they responded, how they reacted, what the implications of this great positive event will be. So we distinguish capitalization, which is taking something good and making it bigger, right? We distinguish that from social support. Social support is usually taking something that is stressful that's happened to your partner and getting them to a better place psychologically. This is probably intuitive for all of you. This is what we do with our friends all the time, right? We help them to feel better. We help them to get some perspective on a problem. We help them to cope with a problem. We help them to say, it wasn't your fault, don't worry about it, or let's try to figure this out together, or is there something I can do to help you? Right? That's social support, and this is a really important function in our relationships. One of the great functions of our relationship is, as we've talked about, there's an efficiency that comes with relationships. Guess what? You can now maintain one household with two incomes, right? There's a real scaling there that helps you. Another real basic core feature of a relationship is there's somebody around you who can say, did you go to the doctor? I just want to make sure you get that checkup with your doctor, right? Because I know your doctor said that. Are you taking your vitamins every day? Is there something that I can do to help you be stronger and healthier and deal with other pressures and challenges that life is throwing your way? This is a basic core feature of our relationships. Carolyn Catrona, now at Iowa State University, wrote a really good book in 1996. She actually is a UCLA PhD, I'm happy to say. And she had a really nice definition of social support. She said that social support is conceptualized most generally as responsiveness to another's needs. That's a lot like that understanding, validation, caring part, right? Responsiveness to another's needs, and more specifically, as acts that communicate caring, that validate the other person's worth or feelings or actions, or that facilitate adaptive coping with the problems through the provision of information or assistance or tangible resources. So when we get into a tight spot or we feel like too much is going on for us to manage and regulate, social support can enter the picture and really be a way for us to feel stronger, to feel more whole, to feel like this isn't a big deal, that you're going to get through this. And a good partner knows how to really achieve that goal for you. Sometimes without, as we've talked about in the invisible support idea, remember we talked about that in the methods lecture, the idea that sometimes they may not have to say any words at all. They just make your life easier without necessarily going out of their way to call attention to the support that they're providing you. So that doesn't need to be explicit and obvious and overt, but it really does put us in a position of being able to achieve more than we would have by our own and to feel stronger and more capable. She also says, Carolyn Catrona, that social support, that consistent responsivity to the other's needs within a close relationship has downstream consequences. This is well understood as an example or an illustration of the intimacy process idea, which is that consistent responsivity to another's needs fosters love, trust, tolerance, and commitment, and all of these contribute to the stability of our relationships. So all else being equal, it should be the case if we have a partner who's looking over our shoulders, a partner who gets us, who's got our backs, that's a relationship that, all else being equal, we're going to want to stay in. I love this New Yorker cover on the left. It is you can see it came out near Valentine's Day 13 years ago now. And it's a woman who really needs practical support, right? She's out there. She's flying through the air. And all this sweet, charming guy is able to offer her on the left side is not the two hands that she really needs. He's offering flowers and candy. Well, guess what? That's not what I need. So that is not responsivity to his partner's needs. That's him saying, this is what I think you'd want. This is what I'm going to give you. Instead of saying, let me look at what's going on in your life. Let me see what you need. Let me deliver that. That's going to keep you from crashing down to the ground. Somebody up here had a question? Daniel.
Where does, so I forget where exactly it was, but where your acts of caring end up making the other person feel like they're obligated to reciprocate?
Yeah, right. So we talked about invisible support. Remember when we talked about that in the methods lecture? And when we make support visible, we sometimes create obligation, right? So good, sensitive support is really, I offer support to my partner not to score points, not to help her know that, hey, I did something for you, not for a sort of a self-oriented reason, which is sort of what this guy's doing. But I do this really because you need it, because you will benefit from it. It's really something that I'm doing for you rather than for me. So there is the possibility that social support can backfire, right? When somebody says, oh, you're just saying that because, the classic example is, you're just, you're changing the baby's diaper now at 10 p.m., so you don't have to get up at 2 o'clock. You're making me do it, right? So how we communicate what we're doing and the message, that's the interpretive filter. Daniel's point is all about the interpretive filter. If I do something positive for my partner and it's not encoded as a positive thing, well, guess what? I didn't increase the likelihood that my partner feels understood or validated or cared for, right? Oh, you're just changing the diaper now, so you don't have to get up in the morning. That's the filter? Ouch, right? That's painful. Priscilla.
You know how invisible support can be more beneficial, but how if the recipient doesn't realize that this person is actually doing this for me? And you're not trying to put it in their face all the time.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, they are doing more than what the recipient thinks they're doing, and they don't realize that.
Yeah, so what if it really is invisible support and it never really gets encoded as something that you're doing?
Yeah.
That's complicated, huh? In a typical enduring relationship, I think that happens all the time and it's healthy. And so, imagine if you're really stressed out and your partner does something for you and you're going on a business trip, your partner picks up the dry cleaning, right? And the dry cleaning, you get home and the dry cleaning is just hanging in your closet, right? And so you're so busy getting out of town on this business trip that you don't really stop and say, oh, my partner did something nice for me. But in the course of a typical relationship, those sorts of things happen all the time. And people then say, oh, I'm back from my trip. Thanks for making that so easy for me. That was really helpful. And part of our obligation as good relationship partners is to be that person who on the left side of the intimacy process model says, wow, I'm lucky to have a partner. You know, here's a disclosure I want to offer. I'm lucky to have a partner who looks out for me. And the other partner says, oh, you would do the same thing for me. That's the middle part. And then both people say, wow, we really feel validated and understood. This is a relationship where there's a lot of give and take. And that's an asset. Good question. Okay, so that is support. I think I've got another example of mismatch support. Right, here's a guy who is committing suicide by jumping off a ledge. And so he needs emotional support. And his kind assistant is giving him practical support, right? So this is an example of the exact wrong thing. And what this guy needs is somebody to say, what's going on? Tell me about what's going on before you get on the ledge. Like, let's have that conversation. So I want to show you, I want to tell you a couple things. I want to show you a clip, and it's going to take me a second to pull out of my PowerPoint here to show it to you. I want to tell you that so on Tuesday, exam, a week from today, Thursday, I am going to show you the follow-up clip of Frank and Nadine from our theory chapter, okay? And it may not be a super long lecture, but I do want to show you what became of their relationship. Part of what I want to do is acknowledge that you guys have been working very hard in this class, and I know that, and that you have probably a ton of other midterms. A week from today, it's going to be a light class. It's not going to be a heavy-duty class, all right? So I want to show you what is a fascinating videotape of Frank and Nadine, all right? So that's going to happen next week. And now I want to find this quick clip, I think. Just give me 1 minute here. I want to show you a clip, I hope, of a couple that I interviewed. And this here. Okay, let me check the audio. Let me give you a little background. So I was interviewing these couples in the studio here at UCLA. And I was really interested, as you know from the book that you're reading for the paper project, I was really interested in how people support one another in such a way that they are able to achieve better health, right? I think that's a really important problem right now in the United States. And we're probably underexploiting the interdependence that we have in our relationships to become healthier and to help our partner become healthier. I interviewed this couple, and I think the audio will be okay. This is Cindy, and this is Timmy. And they are in a long-term partnership. Cindy works at UCLA. She has a very important administrative position in the medical school. Timmy is a personal trainer. And I'm going to show you just a 3-minute clip of them talking about how they've managed their health. And what I really want you to focus on is how Timmy, the really hardcore personal trainer, said to Cindy at one point, I think you should try running this half marathon. And Cindy was not the kind of person who would ever think about doing that. Like, that was totally off our radar. And I want you to see how Timmy, in very subtle, selfless ways, allowed her partner to achieve a goal that she couldn't have ever imagined that she would have been able to achieve, right? So part of what happens in our relationship, and part of what allows us to sort of fight back against that natural stagnation that happens in our relationship, is we sort of say, let me help you achieve a goal. Let me figure out a way to help you become not the person that I want you to be, but the kind of person that you would be interested in becoming, right? So one of the most important things that happens in relationships is not just that we're happy or unhappy, but we're creating opportunities for our partners to grow and change. And hopefully, we're giving our partners enough information that allow us to grow and change, that so that they know what we need to become a better person.
I was working out all the time, personal trainer, taking care of my health, and I had high cholesterol.
So that's Cindy and Timmy. And I just had a blast interviewing them. I was sitting right behind the camera when they were talking about that. And this is the idea, right? That our relationships are so powerful that just saying, oh, by the way, I eat fish. That's what I do. And I'm going to have a relationship with you, and you're going to become healthier because I'm a fish eater? That's awesome, right? That's expanding who she is and enabling her to be a healthy person. And then the second part, you know, you should do this. I have confidence in you. I think you can do this. You can actually run a half marathon. I have no question, and I'm just going to suggest that. And she says, wow, that might be true. The very idea that you think I can do something, I take that seriously. And then throughout this process, throughout their relationship, Timmy, the personal trainer, was really able to help Cindy reach her goals, achieve her goals, and do something that she never thought she would be able to do by herself. And that's what these pro-social processes are. That's how we expand who we are in a relationship, and that is one of the unique powers of a close, intimate, personal relationship. So let's stop there a little early. Be sure to email me with questions. I've got office hours. I'd love to see you.